3 months after the Defiance disappeared into the dimensional tear, Deho stood before the Galactic Council once more. The chamber looked different now. Where once there had been empty seats for species that refused to attend, now every delegation was present. And the attitudes had changed. The Veltar ambassador, the same crystalline being who had voted for retreat, now spoke with humility. Commander Kim, on behalf of the Veltar people, we acknowledge our shame. While humanity stood and fought, we fled. We will carry this dishonor for generations. We don't want your dishonor, Deho replied, his voice tired but firm. We want your help. The war is over, but the work isn't done. The Voidborn are refugees, not monsters. They need assistance adjusting to their new homes. They need to learn how to survive without consuming inhabited worlds. That takes all of us. The council chamber erupted in discussion. For weeks, they had been debating what to do about the Voidborn survivors. Some species wanted to eliminate them entirely. Others wanted to isolate them. But humanity insisted on integration, on cooperation. Jiwan, now promoted to Secretary General of the Galactic Union, managed the negotiations. It was exhausting work, but she had learned something important during the war. Different species could work together when they chose to. The mixed species units had proven that. We're proposing the Voidborn Adjustment Program, she explained to the council. Human engineers will work with Voidborn individuals to develop technology that lets them feed on stellar radiation efficiently. In exchange, the Voidborn will share their dimensional science with us. Everyone benefits. And if they attack again? The Numid delegate asked. Then we fight again, Jiwan said simply. But we give peace a chance first. That's what Captain Boris Shin died for. That's what 400,000 humans and 200,000 aliens gave their lives for. We honor them by trying. The vote passed narrowly. The Voidborn Adjustment Program began immediately. On New Pyongyang, recovery continued. The planet bore the scars of battle. The capital city had entire districts that were still rubble. The planetary shield had been dismantled, its components recycled for reconstruction. But life was returning to normal, slowly. Minho walked through the memorial garden that had been built in the capital's central plaza. Thousands of names were carved into black stone, humans and aliens who had died defending the planet. He found the section for his Marines, running his fingers over names he remembered. Good soldiers, all of them, Captain Choi. A young voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see a group of cadets, mixed species, wearing the new Galactic Defense Force uniforms. They looked nervous and eager in equal measure. We're reporting for training, sir, the lead cadet said. She was human, maybe 18 years old. We want to learn how you defended New Pyongyang. Minho studied them. Human, Veltar, Hivekin, and several species he didn't immediately recognize. The next generation of defenders ready to stand together. First lesson, he said. You don't fight because you're fearless. You fight because you understand what you're protecting. Come with me. Let me show you what we were defending. He led them through the city, showing them the schools that had been rebuilt, the hospitals filled with wounded who had survived, the parks where children played. By the end of the tour, the cadets understood. They were protecting people, families, futures. The training program Minho developed became the model for the entire Galactic Defense Force. Mixed species units, trained to use each species' unique abilities, while maintaining human determination and tactical flexibility. Within a year, 50,000 soldiers had graduated. Within 5 years, every Union world had a defense force trained in human methods. In orbit around Earth, Selman supervised the construction of a new class of warship. The UES Defiance II was larger than any human vessel before it, incorporating technology from a dozen species. But its core systems were human-designed, practical, and reliable. Will it work? Asked her assistant, a Veltar engineer named Sarin who had volunteered during the war and stayed afterward. Of course it'll work, Selman said, not looking up from her calculations. And if it doesn't, we'll fix it until it does. That's engineering. She had been promoted to Chief of Union Engineering, responsible for coordinating technical development across all member species. It was a massive job, but she loved it. Every day brought new challenges, new impossible problems to solve. The engineering philosophy she developed, based on human stubbornness and alien innovation, transformed Union technology. Impossible became a starting point rather than an end point. Engineers from peaceful species learned to think like human engineers, asking not, can this be done, but How many different ways can we make this work? Deho retired from active command 1 year after the war's end. He accepted a position teaching defensive strategy at the Luna Military Academy. On his first day, he stood before a classroom of 200 cadets from 30 different species. "I'm going to teach you how to stand and fight," he began. "Not because fighting is glorious. It isn't. Not because war is noble. It's terrible. But because sometimes running isn't an option. Sometimes people are counting on you, and you have to be the one who stands." He taught them about New Pyongyang, about the holdfasts, about the Defiance's final mission. He taught them tactics and strategy, but mostly, he taught them about leadership and sacrifice. Every evening, he updated his log of the fallen. New names were rare now, casualties of peace rather than war, but he remembered each one. It was his burden and his honor. His office wall displayed the names of everyone who had died under his command. Students would enter for office hours and see the list, understanding immediately the cost of the victories they studied. One student, a young Numid named Voss, asked him about it once. "Commander, doesn't it hurt to look at those names every day?" "Yes," Deho said simply. "That's why I do it. They deserve to be remembered, and I deserve to carry that weight. Leadership means accepting the consequences of your decisions." 5 years after the war, a monument was unveiled on New Pyongyang. It was a massive structure of black stone and crystal, listing every name of every person who died during the defense of the planet. Human and alien names mixed together, equal in sacrifice. The inscription was simple. They were asked to flee. They chose to stand. They were called fools. History called them heroes. The dedication ceremony drew visitors from across the galaxy. Deho attended, along with Hyejin, Minho, Somin, and Jiwon. They were older now, marked by what they had experienced, but still standing. "Do you think it was worth it?" Hyejin asked quietly, looking at the memorial. "Ask them," Deho said, nodding toward the crowds of people walking through the memorial garden. "Families, children, workers rebuilding their lives. They're alive because we stood. That's all the answer I need." The Voidborn integration was progressing slowly but steadily. Several Voidborn individuals had learned to communicate with Union species, explaining their history and their needs. They were not conquerors but survivors, grateful for the chance to exist without destroying others. A Voidborn delegation attended the memorial ceremony. They had no vocal apparatus, but they communicated through dimensional harmonics translated by Veltar intermediaries. Their message was brief. "We remember. We will always remember." The Union had changed fundamentally. The old attitude of retreat and preservation had given way to something new. Not aggression, but determination. Not conquest, but defense. When new threats emerged, the Union stood ready to face them. The legacy of the war lived in 1,000 small ways. Every Union ship carried kinetic weapons alongside energy weapons now. Every colony had trained defense forces. Every school taught the history of the Defiance and New Pyongyang. But the real legacy was simpler. A galaxy that had learned to stand and fight. Species that had learned to work together. A Union that protected its people rather than abandoning them. 10 years after the war, a young Veltar cadet approached Deho after a lecture. She was nervous, her crystalline surface flickering with anxious colors. "Commander Kim, may I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why didn't humans run when every tactical analysis said you should? Why did you stand when it seemed impossible?" Deho looked at her, this young alien who had grown up in a galaxy shaped by human decisions. He thought about Bora and the crew of the Defiance. He thought about the Marines who died in New Pyongyang's streets. He thought about every name on his wall. "Because someone had to show the galaxy that running isn't the only option," he said. "Because millions of people were counting on us. Because it was the right thing to do." "But weren't you afraid?" the cadet asked. Deho smiled. "Terrified. But fear doesn't mean you run. It means you understand what you're fighting for. Remember that. When you face your own impossible moment, remember that fear and courage aren't opposites. Courage is being afraid and standing anyway." The cadet saluted and left, carrying those words with her. She would become a decorated officer one day, would face her own impossible choices, would teach her own students. The cycle continued. That evening, Deho returned to his apartment and updated his log one final time. Not with a new name, but with a note. The war ended 10 years ago today. The peace continues. They didn't die for nothing. Their sacrifice built something better. That's enough. The Defiance pushed through the void-born swarm like a knife through flesh. Around it, 5 escort ships fought desperately to clear a path. Behind them, 20 species provided covering fire, their weapons creating a corridor of destruction through enemy lines. Bora sat in her command chair, watching the tactical display. Every second brought new threats. Every minute cost them another escort. The UES Hammer was first to fall, overwhelmed by void-born boarding craft. Then the Resilient, its reactor breached by enemy fire. The small fleet was dying to get her close enough. All power to forward shields, she ordered. We're going straight through. The Defiance shuddered as impacts hammered its hull. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Engineering reported fires in 3 sections. Medical was overwhelmed with wounded. But they kept moving forward. On the bridge, Bora's tactical officer worked frantically to plot the safest course. It was a young Veltar volunteer named Kira, one of the first aliens to join the human cause. Her crystalline fingers manipulated the controls with desperate speed. Captain, the tier is destabilizing our sensors, Kira reported. I can't get accurate readings. Best guess then, Bora said. How close are we? 2 million kilometers, but the Voidborn are concentrating their forces directly ahead. Bora studied the display. The dimensional tear hung in space like a wound in reality, pulsing with dark energy. Around it, hundreds of Voidborn ships circled like antibodies protecting an infection. They knew what the humans were attempting. Message from the fleet, her communications officer said. They're asking if we need more support. Tell them no, Bora replied. They've done enough. This is our mission now. She opened a channel to her crew. All hands, this is the captain. We're entering the final approach. I won't lie to you. The next hour is going to be hell, but we're going to make it. We're going to reach that tear, and we're going to end this war. I'm proud to serve with every one of you. The ship bucked as another Voidborn weapon struck home. Bora gripped her armrests and kept her face calm. Leadership meant showing strength even when you felt terror. They lost another escort at 1 million kilometers. The UES Guardian sacrificed itself to intercept a massive Voidborn vessel that would have destroyed the Defiance. Its captain sent a final message. Finish the mission. Make it count. At 500,000 kilometers, Bora's science officer made an unexpected discovery. Lieutenant Junho was a young man, barely 25, specializing in dimensional physics. He had been monitoring the tear's emissions since they entered range. Captain, you need to see this, he said, his voice shaking. I've been analyzing the energy patterns from the tear. It's not an invasion route. It's a refugee escape. Bora left her chair and crossed to his station. Explain. The Voidborn aren't attacking us by choice, Junho continued, pulling up data streams. Their dimension is collapsing. Look at these readings. Massive entropy increase, universal heat death accelerating. They're fleeing their universe because it's dying. The revelation hit Bora like a physical blow. The Voidborn weren't conquerors. They were refugees. Desperate, starving refugees from a dying universe, consuming everything they found because they were literally starving to death. Does this change the mission? Asked Commander Taeyong, her second in command. Bora thought about it. The Voidborn were still destroying inhabited worlds. They were still killing millions. Their desperation didn't make them less dangerous, but it made them different. It made them something that could potentially be reasoned with, redirected, saved. Yes, she said finally. Yes, it changes everything. We're not closing the tear. We're modifying it. She called an emergency meeting with her senior staff. In the conference room, surrounded by exhausted officers, she laid out a new plan. Instead of collapsing the dimensional tear, they would reconfigure it to be unidirectional and controlled. The Voidborn could still pass through, but in limited numbers, and they could be directed toward uninhabited star systems, where they could feed on stellar radiation without harming anyone. It's more dangerous, Taeyong warned. We'll need to stay inside the tier longer, manually adjusting its structure while Voidborn forces attack us. I know, Bora said. But if we can save both civilizations, isn't it worth trying? Her crew voted unanimously to accept the new mission parameters. Soman, monitoring from the Indomitable, nearly screamed when she heard the plan. That's insane. The original mission was already a suicide run. This is worse. But she immediately began working on new technical parameters, transmitting them to the Defiance as fast as she could calculate them. If Bora was going to attempt the impossible, Somin would make sure she had the best information available. The Defiance entered the outer boundary of the dimensional tear at 1400 hours. Reality immediately began to break down. The ship's sensors showed impossible readings. Distance became meaningless. Time flowed backward in some sections, forward in others. Crew members reported seeing things that couldn't exist, geometries that hurt to perceive. Maintain course, Bora ordered, fighting down her own nausea. Engineering, begin the reconfiguration sequence. Deep in the ship's reactor room, a team of engineers worked in conditions that would have killed them within minutes if not for their protective suits. They manually adjusted the reactor output, creating specific radiation frequencies designed to reshape dimensional barriers. The work was precise, delicate, and had to be done while the ship was being torn apart around them. Void-born creatures phased through the hull, attacking the crew. Security teams fought them off with flame weapons and explosives. Every corridor became a battle zone. Bora coordinated everything from the bridge, her voice steady despite the chaos. Team 1, increase output by 0.3%. Team 2, redirect flow to the secondary emitters. Team 3, prepare for emergency shutdown if needed. Hours passed. The crew worked beyond exhaustion, beyond fear. They lost people constantly. A void-born creature would appear, grab someone, and phase back out of reality before anyone could react. The bodies simply vanished, existing neither in this dimension nor the other. Kira, the Veltar tactical officer, was killed when the bridge took a direct hit. She shattered into 1,000 crystal fragments, each one dimming as her consciousness faded. Her last words were a status update, professional until the end. By 70 hours into the mission, the Defiance was barely functional. Life support was failing. Half the crew was dead. The ship itself was more debris than vessel, held together by determination and Soman's brilliant engineering. But the work was done. The dimensional tear had been reconfigured. Bora could see it on her sensors, the structure stabilizing into a controlled gateway. Void-born ships began passing through in single file rather than massive swarms, and they were being naturally directed toward 7 dead star systems humanity had already identified as suitable feeding grounds. "We did it," Taeyong whispered, staring at the readings. "It worked." "Yeah," Bora said, looking around her destroyed bridge. "We did." She tried to activate the engines for escape. Nothing happened. The propulsion systems were completely dead. They were drifting, powerless, in the most dangerous region of space. "Can we repair the engines?" she asked engineering. The response was devastating. "Negative, Captain. We have no power, no materials, and no time. The tear's radiation will kill us in an hour even with suits." Bora understood. They had accomplished their mission, but they wouldn't survive it. She opened a channel to the fleet. "This is Captain Bora Shin to all forces. Mission accomplished. The tear has been stabilized and redirected. The Voidborn can pass through safely without threatening inhabited space. We're unable to return, but the war is over." Daeho's voice came back immediately, choked with emotion. "Bora, we're coming for you." "No, Commander. You can't reach us in time, and we both know it. Use your resources to help the Void-born refugees adjust to their new homes. Make sure this sacrifice means something." She closed the channel before he could argue. Around her, the surviving crew gathered on the bridge. 37 people remained from the original 350. They were human, Veltar, Numid, Hivekin. They had become family through shared danger. "I'm sorry I couldn't bring you home," Bora said to them. "You did bring us home, Captain," one Marine replied. "We're right where we belong. We fixed the problem. We saved both sides. That's home enough." The Defiance drifted into the tier, its hull beginning to dissolve. Bora recorded a final log entry, her words calm and clear. "We didn't run. We fixed it. That's what humans do. That's what we all do when we choose to stand together." The ship's power failed completely. The bridge went dark, and Captain Bora Shin and her crew passed into history, remembered not for how they died, but for what they accomplished. 6 weeks after the Battle of New Pyongyang, the war had transformed into something new. Humanity had not won, not really. The Voidborn kept coming, emerging from their dimensional tear in endless waves. But humanity had proven something important. The invaders could be stopped. Daeho stood in the command center of Holdfast 7, one of 12 defensive positions humanity had established across the border region. The Holdfast was built from a hollowed asteroid, its surface bristling with railguns and missile launchers. Inside, 3,000 humans lived and worked, knowing they stood between the Voidborn and countless innocent lives. "Commander, "You have visitors," Hyejin announced. 3 alien soldiers entered the command center. 2 were young Veltar warriors, their crystalline bodies marked with symbols of disgrace. The third was a hivekin drone, separated from its collective swarm. They looked nervous and determined in equal measure. "We wish to volunteer," the lead Veltar said, its voice resonating through its crystal structure. "Our elders call us foolish. They say we bring shame to our families. But we have seen what you humans accomplished at New Pyongyang. We wish to learn this courage." Daiho studied them for a moment. He had expected this. After the defense of New Pyongyang, humanity's message had spread across the Union. Some saw it as proof of human insanity, but others, especially the young, saw it as inspiration. "This isn't courage," Daiho said quietly. "It's terror managed through discipline. Can you handle that?" "Yes, Commander." "Then welcome to Holdfast 7, report to Tactical. We need communications officers who can interface with Veltar crystal-based systems." Over the following weeks, more volunteers arrived, young warriors from peaceful species who believed the galaxy was worth defending, soldiers who had been shamed for suggesting their people should fight, even some elders who remembered the old days, before the Union had grown comfortable with running from threats. Jiwan found herself coordinating this strange alliance from her office on Earth. The Galactic Council was in chaos, with younger representatives challenging the evacuation policy. She worked 18-hour days, matching volunteers to positions where their unique abilities could help. The Veltar, with their crystalline biology, made excellent communications officers. Their bodies could transmit and receive signals across vast distances without technological aids. The Numids, despite their pacifist culture, proved invaluable as zero-gravity repair crews. Their gaseous forms could slip through damaged hull sections too dangerous for solid beings. The hivekin drones, cut off from their collectives, became fearless damage control specialists, working in environments that would kill others. But the real change was in human tactics. Minho had started training mixed-species marine units at Holdfast 3. The result surprised everyone, especially him. "The secret," he explained to his training officers, "is that we don't make them fight like humans. We make them fight like themselves, but with human determination." A Veltar warrior could shatter into thousands of fragments and reform elsewhere, perfect for reconnaissance. A Numid could infiltrate enemy ships through ventilation systems. A hivekin drone could sacrifice itself to save others without the psychological trauma that haunted human soldiers. The mixed units became devastatingly effective. Where pure human forces struggled, the combined teams excelled. On the Indomitable, Daiho watched the casualty reports and felt the weight of command crushing down on him. Every day, more names were added to the list. Every night, he updated his private log, recording each death, each sacrifice. His officers worried about him. He had stopped sleeping properly, stopped eating regularly. "You need to rest." "Sir," Hyejin said one evening, finding him alone in his quarters with the list of names projected on the wall. "How can I rest?" Daiho asked, his voice hoarse. "Every decision I make costs lives. Every tactic, every strategy. These people trust me and I send them to die." "You send them to fight," Hyejin corrected. "There's a difference." "And sir, they're winning." It was true. Slowly, painfully, the holdfasts were working. The Voidborn advance had been stopped. The creatures still came through the dimensional tear, but they were being contained, held at the border by a thin line of defenders who refused to break. But the Voidborn were adapting. That was the terrifying part. Each wave learned from the previous one. They developed acid-spitting organisms to counter flame weapons. They created gravity manipulators to defend against kinetic strikes. The war became a race of innovation versus evolution. Hyejin spent days analyzing Voidborn tactics, looking for patterns and weaknesses. She earned a reputation among the alien volunteers as the demon of solutions, always finding some new approach when the old methods failed. "They're not really individual creatures," she explained during one strategy session. "They're more like cells in a larger organism. Kill one and the others learn from its death. That's why they adapt so fast." "So how do we beat something that learns from dying?" Minho asked. "We don't beat it," Hyejin said slowly. "We can't kill them all. There are too many, and they're still coming through that dimensional tear. We need to close the tear itself." The idea spread quickly through the command structure. Closing the tear would end the invasion permanently. But the tier existed in a region of space swarming with void-born ships. Any vessel approaching it would be torn apart, unless the mission was specifically designed as a sacrifice play. Salmon understood the engineering requirements immediately. We need ships modified to destabilize dimensional barriers. The reactors would need to be reconfigured to emit specific radiation frequencies, and the ships would need to fly directly into the tear. Could the crew survive? Jiwon asked during a secure conference call. No, So-min said flatly. The radiation alone would kill them before they reached the tear, and even if it didn't, the dimensional forces would rip the ships apart. This is a one-way mission. Silence fell over the command channel. Everyone understood what this meant. They were asking for volunteers to die. I'll do it, said a voice over the channel. Captain Bora Shin commanded the frigate Defiance. She was 43 years old, had served for 20 years, and had a reputation as one of the finest captains in the fleet. I'll take my ship in. Bora, no, Daeho said. We can't ask this of you. You're not asking, Commander. I'm volunteering. The Defiance is fast enough to make the run, and my crew is good enough to get there. Someone has to do this. Let it be us. Over the next week, 300 humans and 50 alien volunteers joined Bora's mission. They knew they wouldn't return. They knew their families would grieve. They knew historians would debate whether the sacrifice was necessary. They volunteered anyway. The Defiance and 5 escort ships were modified in secret at Holdfast 7. Salmon worked around the clock, installing the specialized equipment needed for the mission. She trained Bora's engineers personally, walking them through every system, every backup, every possible failure point. If the primary emitter fails, switch to secondary, Salmon explained, her voice tired but focused. If secondary fails, you can manually trigger the tertiary by bypassing the safety protocols. It's dangerous, but it'll work. How dangerous? One engineer asked. You'll die 3 minutes faster, Salmon said. At that point, what's the difference? The dark humor helped. They all knew what they were signing up for. Daeho visited the Defiance the night before launch. He walked through its corridors meeting the crew. They were calm, focused, ready. Some were making recordings for families. Others were writing letters. A few were simply quiet, preparing themselves mentally. He found Bora on the bridge running final system checks. She looked up when he entered. Come to talk me out of it, Commander? She asked. No, Daeho said. I came to thank you. And to tell you that what you're doing matters. It matters more than you know. We're not heroes, Bora said. We're just doing our jobs. That's what makes you heroes, Daeho replied. The next morning, the Defiance and its escorts launched toward the dimensional tear. Behind them, the entire human fleet and their alien allies provided covering fire. Ahead, the Voidborn swarm waited, sensing the threat. The first Voidborn ship entered weapons range at 600 hours. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of the Indomitable, its surface rippling with impossible geometry that hurt to look at directly. Daeho gave the order and 30 human ships opened fire simultaneously. Missiles streaked through space, their nuclear warheads leaving trails of light. Railgun rounds followed. Solid slugs of tungsten accelerated to a fraction of light speed. The humans threw everything they had at the lead Voidborn vessel. The creature absorbed the energy weapons effortlessly, its body glowing brighter as it fed on the plasma and particle beams. But the solid projectiles were different. The railgun rounds punched through its shifting surface, tearing huge chunks from its mass. The nuclear warheads, crude by Union standards, delivered their payload in the form of heat and pressure rather than directed energy. The Voidborn ship shuddered and began to break apart. Target destroyed, Hyejin reported, her voice filled with surprise. Commander, the kinetic weapons are working. Daeho allowed himself a brief smile. Of course they are. These things eat energy, but they can't digest metal moving at 50 kilometers per second. Focus all fire on kinetic weapons. Save the energy weapons for our own shields. The battle quickly became a brutal exchange. The Voidborn adapted fast, sending smaller vessels to intercept the railgun rounds while their larger ships returned fire with weapons that seemed to unmake reality itself. Where their beams struck, human ships simply ceased to exist, erased from space without even debris remaining. The UES Valiant was the first to fall, caught by 3 Voidborn beams simultaneously. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. 200 lives erased in an instant. Daeho forced himself to watch, to remember. He would mourn later, Now he needed to keep his remaining ships alive. "They're adapting to our tactics," Hyejin said, working frantically at her console. "Sir, we need something new." Daeho studied the battlefield, his mind racing. The Voidborn were powerful and numerous, but they fought like animals, using overwhelming force without strategy. They came straight at their targets, confident in their ability to absorb damage. "Can we use that?" he muttered. An idea formed. "Hyejin, calculate a slingshot trajectory around New Pyongyang. I want to use the planet's gravity to accelerate our attack velocity." "That's insane, sir. The G-forces would tear us apart." "Not if we're already dead," Daeho said. "Bring up the damaged ships, the ones that are venting atmosphere or running on auxiliary power." Understanding dawned on Hyejin's face. "You want to use them as weapons. Not just the ships, everything, debris, cargo containers, destroyed fighters, anything with mass. We accelerate it around the planet and throw it at them faster than they can react." Hyejin began running calculations, her fingers flying across the controls. It could work. It's wasteful and desperate, but it could work. Good. That's the most human plan I've heard all day. Make it happen. The Anvil Protocol, as it would later be called, turned the tide of the orbital battle. Damaged human ships made suicide runs, using the planet's gravity to slingshot themselves into voidborn formations at impossible speeds. The impacts were devastating. Even cargo containers, when accelerated to sufficient velocity, became weapons of terrible destruction. But the Voidborn were learning. They began spreading out, making the slingshot tactic less effective. And worse, they started landing ground forces on New Pyongyang itself. Minho watched the drop pods rain down from orbit, each one carrying Voidborn warriors to the surface. His Marines were already in position throughout the capital city, hidden in buildings and defensive emplacements. The civilian population had been moved to underground shelters, though everyone knew those might become tombs if the planet fell. The first Voidborn creature emerged from its pod in the central plaza. It was roughly humanoid but wrong in every way, its limbs bent at impossible angles, and its skin seemed to phase between solid and liquid states. It had no visible eyes, but it clearly sensed the Marines hidden nearby. Minho gave the signal, and 50 soldiers opened fire. Bullets and rockets struck the creature from all sides. It screamed, a sound that made hardened soldiers flinch and tried to return fire with energy beams from its hands. But it was already dying. The bullet's simple lead and copper tore through it faster than it could regenerate. It collapsed, its body melting into a pool of dark liquid that steamed and evaporated. "They're vulnerable," Minho reported over the command channel. "Solid projectiles work. Energy weapons just feed them." More pods landed. More Voidborn emerged. The battle for New Pyongyang became a grinding urban warfare nightmare. The creatures were fast and deadly, but they couldn't adapt quickly enough to the humans' primitive weapons. Explosives, bullets, even fire proved effective. In one sector, Marines lured a group of Voidborn into a fuel depot and ignited it. The creatures burned, their screams echoing across the city. In another, soldiers collapsed a building on top of their enemies, crushing them under tons of concrete and steel. It was brutal, ugly fighting, but it was working. Meanwhile, in the engineering section of the Indomitable, Soman was performing a miracle. She had stripped systems from 3 destroyed human ships, salvaged components from the orbital defense platforms, and somehow combined them with the planet's fusion reactors. "This is impossible," her assistant engineer said, staring at the blueprints. "Yeah," Soman agreed, not looking up from her work. "But I'm doing it anyway. Hand me the plasma couplers." The theory was simple. The execution was anything but. She needed to create a planetary shield strong enough to stop Voidborn ships from getting through, using technology never designed to work together. The math didn't add up. The power requirements exceeded what the reactors could provide. The entire thing should collapse the moment she activated it. Soman worked for 18 straight hours, fueled by coffee and stubborn determination. She rerouted power from non-essential systems across the entire planet. She used cargo containers filled with conductive alloy as makeshift capacitors. She jury-rigged connections that would make a Union engineer faint. "Ready to test," she finally announced. Daeho, monitoring from orbit, gave the authorization. "Do it!" Soman threw the switch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a shimmering dome of energy began forming around New Pyongyang, growing from the planet's poles and spreading toward the equator. It flickered and sparked, clearly unstable, but it held. A void-born ship struck the shield at full speed. Energy crackled across the barrier's surface and the shield held. The void-born ship bounced off, stunned by the impact. "Impossible," Soman's assistant whispered. "Tell that to the void-born," Soman replied, allowing herself a tired smile. The shield changed everything. With the planet protected, the human fleet could focus on aggressive tactics. They stopped defending and started hunting. Ship by ship, the void-born fleet was worn down. After 6 hours of brutal combat, only 12 human ships remained operational, but the void-born fleet was broken. The creatures that had seemed unstoppable at the battle's start were now retreating, unable to penetrate the planet's defenses or overwhelm the stubborn human resistance. On the surface, Minho's Marines had cleared the last void-born from the capital. The creatures were dead or driven back to their landing sites. The cost had been terrible. 40,000 soldiers dead, 200,000 civilians killed in the fighting, but 22 million lives had been saved. Deho stood on his bridge looking at what remained of his fleet. 18 ships destroyed, so many good people gone, but they had done it. They had held. "Sir," Hijin said quietly, "we're receiving transmissions from the Union fleets. They're asking how we survived." Deho thought about the question. How had they survived? With outdated weapons and desperate tactics, with engineering that shouldn't have worked, with soldiers willing to die for people they had never met. "Tell them we stood our ground," he said finally. "Tell them we fought." He opened a channel to the retreating Union fleets. His message was simple and direct. "To all Union vessels, this is Commander Deho Kim of the UES Indomitable. New Pyongyang has been defended. The Voidborn can be stopped. We're not asking you to die with us. We're showing you that you don't have to die at all. You can stand and fight. You can win." Across the galaxy, on ships from dozens of species, his words were heard, and some began to wonder if the humans were right. The bridge of the UES Indomitable hummed with tension as Commander Deho Kim stared at the holographic display before him. Red warnings flashed across the screen, each one representing a tear in the fabric of space itself. He had seen many things in his 30 years of service, but nothing like this. "Commander, we're receiving reports from Sector 9, said Hee-Jin Park, his tactical officer. Her fingers moved rapidly across her console, pulling up data streams from distant monitoring stations. "The dimensional barrier has been breached. Multiple contacts emerging." Deho leaned forward, his weathered face illuminated by the red glow of alert lights. He had fought in the border wars, survived 3 ship destructions, and earned more medals than he cared to count. But the fear in Hye-Jin's voice was something new, something he had never heard from her before. "What are we looking at?" he asked. "The Voidborn, sir, just like the ancient warnings described. They're real. The Voidborn." Every species in the Galactic Union had heard the legends. Creatures from another dimension that consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space behind. Most thought they were myths, stories told to frighten children. The Union had existed for thousands of years without seeing them. Until now. Down in the engineering section, Salmon Lee was running diagnostics on the ship's weapons systems when the alert reached her. She grabbed her tablet and rushed toward the main reactor room. If they were going into combat, she needed every system running at peak efficiency. The Indomitable was old by human standards, nearly 40 years of service, but Salmon knew every pipe, every wire, every quirk of the aging vessel. She could make it sing when others would have scrapped it. In the Marine quarters, Captain Minho Choi was drilling his troops when the alarm sounded. He barked orders and 300 Marines scrambled to their equipment lockers. They had practiced this drill 1,000 times, but this felt different. The men and women moved with purpose, checking weapons and armor with methodical precision. Minho watched them with pride. These were good soldiers, ready for whatever came next. On the other side of the galaxy, in the gleaming halls of the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Jiwan Kang sat in the human delegation's seat. The emergency session had been called within hours of the first sighting. Around her, representatives from 47 species filled the circular room, their various forms creating a bizarre tapestry of galactic life. The Veltar ambassador spoke first, its crystalline body refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. "The threat is confirmed. Voidborn ships have entered our dimension at multiple points along the outer rim. We have 6 hours before they reach the first inhabited systems." A Numid delegate, its gaseous form contained within a transparent suit, added its concerns. Our analysis shows 14 colony worlds directly in their path. Total population, 40 million souls. We must evacuate immediately. G1 felt her stomach tighten. 14 worlds, millions of lives. Most of those colonies had significant human populations. New Pyongyang alone housed 8 million humans and 15 million aliens from various species who had made it their home. How long to evacuate? She asked. The Hivekin representative speaking through its swarm mind answered, insufficient time. Our transport capacity can move perhaps 20% of the population before the Voidborn arrive. The chamber erupted into debate. Species argued about which colonies to prioritize, which populations to save first. G1 listened to them negotiate over lives like they were discussing cargo manifests. She felt rage building in her chest. What about fighting? She said, her voice cutting through the chaos. The chamber fell silent. The Veltar ambassador turned its faceted head toward her. Fighting? Ambassador Kang, the Voidborn cannot be fought. They consume energy weapons. They adapt to all known combat strategies. The only option is retreat. Retreat to where? Jiwan demanded. You're talking about abandoning 40 million people. We're talking about saving what we can, the Numid delegate replied. Sometimes survival requires difficult choices. One by one, the species voted. The crystalline Veltar voted to retreat. The gaseous Numids voted to retreat. The insectoid Hivekin voted to retreat. Every elder species, every advanced civilization in the Union, made the same choice. Pull back 3,000 light years. Establish a new defensive line. Sacrifice the outer colonies. When the vote reached humanity's turn, Jiwan stood. She thought about her orders from Earth Command. She thought about the millions of humans living on those doomed worlds. She thought about the children playing in the parks of New Pyongyang, the families sitting down to dinner, the workers building new lives on the frontier. Humanity votes no, she said clearly. We will not abandon our colonies. We will not leave 40 million people to die. The chamber exploded with shocked voices. The Veltar ambassador leaned toward her. Ambassador Kang, this is suicide. Your fleet cannot stand against the Voidborn. Perhaps, Jiwon replied. But we're going to try anyway. She opened a secure channel to Earth Command and received confirmation within minutes. Human ships across the border regions received new orders. While other species fled inward, humanity would move forward. Every available warship, every combat-capable vessel was redirected to the threatened colonies. Back on the Indomitable, Daiho received his orders with grim satisfaction. He turned to his crew. Set course for New Pyongyang. Maximum speed. Sir, Heijin said carefully. We're one ship. The Voidborn fleet has over 200 vessels. Then we'll need to be clever, Daiho replied. He brought up the tactical display and began calculating approach vectors. Get me every human ship within range, and start working on their weaknesses. Everything has a weakness. As the Indomitable turned toward danger, other human ships did the same. The UES Defiant, the UES Resilience, the UES Stubborn Pride. 30 ships in total, all that could reach New Pyongyang in time. It wasn't much, but it was what they had. Somin worked frantically to boost the reactor output. She pushed the old systems beyond their rated limits, knowing that survival mattered more than regulations. If the ship survived the battle, she could repair the damage. If it didn't, safety margins wouldn't matter anyway. Minho gathered his Marines and gave them the situation plainly. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and everyone thinks we're crazy. So basically, a normal Tuesday, check your gear and say your prayers. We've got a planet to defend. The Marines responded with dark humor and determined faces. They were scared. Minho could see it in their eyes. But they were ready. That was enough. As the human fleet converged on New Pyongyang, sensors detected the Voidborn approach. The alien ships were unlike anything in Union records. They seemed to twist space around them, their forms shifting and changing as if they existed partially in another dimension. They moved with terrible purpose toward the helpless colony world. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Daiho watched them come. Around him, his crew worked silently at their stations. Outside, the other human ships took up formation. It wasn't a proper battle line. They didn't have enough ships for that. But it was something. All ships report ready, Hyejin announced. Daiho took a deep breath. Behind them, the Union fleets retreated into the darkness. Ahead, the Voidborn approached like a plague, and in between, 30 human ships prepared to make their stand. For New Pyongyang, Daiho said quietly. For humanity, For everyone we're protecting. Open fire when they enter range.